Hi everyone, how's it going? This is Edgar. I'm going to be doing a quick little, I'm just basically going to type out and walk through what I was doing to go ahead and complete Mod 10, the homework, and effectively show how I worked on doing the subclasses, quick explanation of what field versus field does, and just a little quick overview on object-oriented programming as we learned in class. Um, the homework was of course simplified, in which case I took the completion of the original homework and then just reverse engineered it to compile these instructions here. All right, cool. So let's get to it. The first thing here, we're going to create a car class with information color, brand, model, year, and speed. Don't worry about this. This is for me. Use field first. That's for me. I'll go ahead and talk about that later, though. So first, we're going to go ahead and define the car. Of course, the point of this video is not only to walk through what I did with the homework, but to also show you the syntax of how to create a class and a subclass with Dr. Racket here. So this, of course, creates a car class here. What ends up happening is once we put the percentage there, that will tell Racket that or Lisp, whatever, that it's going to be a class, excuse me. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and type in the superclass over here, object percent. What ends up happening is when we create a subclass, this will be more important later, we would put in our parent class right here. Object is effectively what I called the root class. I don't remember if that was the technical jargon or not, but effectively that is what the program or the language understands. That object percent means that this is going to be the ultimate parent class and there are no parents to that. It does need a holder here for syntax, so then object was created to hold that place. If there's more deep meaning to that, I don't know because I am a student. So now we're going to go ahead and create our fields. I'm going to use field first here because that's how we were doing it in class. Then I'll show an alternate method later. So I'm going to type in here no color for this. Well, I'll tell you what, because this video is already going to run long, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste what ends up going here. So we're going to have the fields color, brand, model, year, and then the current speed, which is what was asked for in the homework. Now here's a little fun fact. I'm going to hit Control I, and that's actually going to format the entirety of Racket. I don't know if you've seen the professor do that a couple times. It's kind of a little fun thing to do, so that way I don't have to keep going back and forth with spaces, etc. Anyway, once we have our fields down, we're going to go ahead and close our field function here that we're doing, or field function that we called upon. After we do that, we're going to go ahead and type in super new. What that ends up doing is super new actually calls on the superclass. When it was taught in class, it was just kind of like, oh, it's something that needs to go there. It, of course, does need to go there. It is part of the syntax, but it's good to know that super new is what's going to go ahead and call on the parent class or the root class. So that'll be more important when we create a subclass later. For now, we're effectively done with our object, with our class, excuse me, so we can close that out. What would go after super new is if we want to do any public defines. So that leads us to B, create getters for color, brand, model, year, and speed, and then one setter for speed. We did this in the homework. I know that that was part of the requirement, and I have no doubt that we all know how to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste all of that over here. Boom, boom, hit Control I just to make sure everything's well. So what I've done is I've set get color, that's a getter, and then that's going to return color. Get brand, returns brand, model, model, year, year, and so forth. And it's calling these fields so that it returns these values whenever they're called. The setter, of course, is going to set the current speed, and then that's the name of our function, and it's going to take an argument of new speed. So that way when we feed it a new speed, it'll say set, and it'll take this value, which is our current speed, and then it'll replace it, or rather update it with new speed, which is, what we learned. Great. Oh, I made a mistake here. Super new is supposed to be above all of these defined values. It's part of the syntax. So if there's another reason, I don't know it. The one thing that I do want to go ahead and type out just to show kind of my thought process behind it, because I found that a little difficult, was create a function that returns all of the information in a string. So that's effectively when we type in, I'm going to call this get info, we want to make sure that it returns the color, brand, model, year, and current speed. I took the inspiration, of course, from what we did in class, and yeah, let me show you how I work this out. So the first thing that we know is that we're going to go ahead and return a big giant string. We want to go ahead and basically piece together all these things. So I'm going to use string append because we're going to have multiple strings and then they're going to go ahead and be appended together. So I'm going to write it all down here. Before I actually start writing though, I kind of wanted to show you the way that I coded this was by having in my mind an idea of how I wanted the result to look like. So I want the result to be read color, colon, no color, and no color. I'm just using that right now because that's this value. Then I want it to be, brand, and then type no brand with commas and stuff. The reason why that's important, or I wanted to show that, is because when I just started going, it just seemed normal to me to then start typing things like color, and then space, and then after that, my next one, then I was going to type in, we're input color there. Then I do like comma, space, brand, colon, space, and all that. So I'm writing it like this, and it looks kind of funky because in my mind, I know that this entire chunk here is this entire chunk here. So that's just kind of what's going through my mind. Now, the first thing is, because we've already created our setters and all of our getters, it's good coding, from what I understand, to then always use your getters and setters from then on. Right now, it's not super important. I can literally just call color and it's not going to break our program. But then what will happen is later on in our programming lives, it's actually going to be incredibly important to only use the getters in case for whatever reason there's a bunch of like protections coded into the getter, so that if you use the getter, you can't break it. But then if you start using the field itself, and change this to a value that shouldn't, it might break the entire program and it may take forever to find. So instead, it's always just good practice to always use the getters once you've had them. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of the video, and I will actually kind of highlight that using the getters is actually something that helped me break through a brick wall when I was typing in a subclass. I'll show you later. Basically ended up being a huge problem that I couldn't figure out until I realized that I had to use the getters in order to fix it. Anyway, in order to use the getter within the same class here, you have to send, because it sends a message to like, hey, this is the class that I want to touch upon. And then I wrote this. It's just something that I ended up reading in the textbook. I think it's also in the professor's examples. This basically calls upon this class. So that way, when I click send this, it's going to use the function getColor, which is, of course, our getter. Typing in this here is going to activate getColor, which will return color. Sounds like a very roundabout way, but again, it's just good programming. Anyway, I'm going to effectively just do this for the rest of them, and then instead of boring you and typing it all out, I have already done that, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste. So then it'll end up looking like this. Code, send this, get color. Brand, send this, get brand. Model, you get the picture. The only thing here, the difference, is when it comes to year and current speed, as you may or may not have already noticed, is that year returns a number, as does current speed. Now, if we're going to go ahead and use string append, because they're all going to be strings, then we, of course, need to turn the number into a string. So then I just did number to string, and then for get year, then I use my little getter. Send this, get year, that's a number, goes through number to string, so then we end up getting with the string 1900, which then would turn into year 1900. So that's basically the only thing. Once that's done, we of course need to make sure we close our string append, close our define, and with that, we have completed our first kind of section of assignments, which is to create a class with these fields, create getters and the one setter for speed, and then create a function that returns all of the information in a string. The reason this is important is because it's going to help us with our GUI, which I think I'm going to make a second video for that. We'll see. All right, now that we're done with that, we effectively don't have to touch this car class anymore, so that's phenomenal.